Well, good evening, everybody, and thank you very much for coming away from the barbecue weather to join in for this session, which should be half an hour or so, maybe less, maybe a bit more. Before I start, I'd obviously like to thank Ian very much for his technical work in getting this to work so well tonight. This is the third one we've done, and the other person to be thanked, who you never really see up in front of anywhere because he's always behind the scenes, is a very great man. You can see on the screen there now, Peter Manning. He's just finished his 15th magazine, and he'll be continuing doing lots more. So I want to thank both of you before we start. We could all give them a round of applause for their wonderful work. So thank you again. And now tonight, it's not a lecture, it's not an essay, it's a workshop. Workshops are things we all join in together, and we want to hear everyone's opinion. It's all valued. Now, with this system, I'm going to ask the question, then there'll be 30 seconds in which you have time to decide whether you do or do not want to press your buzzer. And if you do, as the answers come in, the order in which they come in, Ian, with his clever technique there, knows exactly the order that you pressed your buttons. So you'll be called up to answer one by one in that order. We may not take all 140 of you at the first go, but what we will try and do is take a few and keep the subject and keep it interesting. So first of all, I found their blue buzzer. If they have, we can raise them. I think we might have, but we'll press on anyway. Question 1. Who is the invisible officer in the invisible office? Fingers on your buzzers. We've got 30 seconds. Time starts now. Right, Ian, who's our number one answerer tonight?
Well, the first answer is Stephen's iPad.
Right.
Hello, good evening. I would say that all of us would be the invisible.
Hello, Stephen.
Good evening. Hello there. I would like to say that all of us would be the invisible officer in the lodge.
Can you repeat?
Can you hear me?
All of them?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, I can. You think everybody's the invisible officer?
Yes.
Okay. Who's the second one, Ian? Who's the next one?
So the second one is Bharat.
I would say it's the Tyler.
It's the Tyler, you think?
Mm.
Okay. We've still not got the right answer. Number 3.
I'm afraid that's all you've got. I think you've.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, I have to have a cheat in here. Peter, can we switch on Peter's microphone? Oh.
Bear with me, he hasn't put his hand up, so I've got to go find him.
Oh, he has. He's put his fingers up. Oh, there was more than 2, I'm pleased to say.
Oh dear. Have you got me now?
And we've got you.
Yes, got
I will get the hang of this technology before long. I think it's got to be the most important person in the room.
Yes.
It's the prompter. I mean, if you haven't got a good prompter at a meeting, it's a nightmare. We've all been to lodges where the poor old worshipper master was struggling a bit, and the prompter, instead of waiting for the right moment to give him the word, and all he needs is one word, will either wait and wait and wait and not give him it at all, or give him a whole sentence, and he's so confused that he doesn't know what he's doing. So I honestly think it must be the prompter.
Absolutely right. Well done, Peter. That is exactly it. And I agree with your sentiments completely. And the fact that nobody considered him the prompter, I've lost the mic, haven't I? No, there we are. The fact that nobody considered the prompter means that that's how serious this subject is, about people forgetting the importance of the man who prompts. So I'm just going to say a few words about that now, if I may. The prompter is the cue man. Every lodge at every meeting should designate one brother who is not actually performing any ritual that evening, so long as there are sufficient brethren present to enable this, to act as the prompter. Even if there's not a ceremony to be performed, someone must be allocated this job, as even in the openings and closings, sometimes a memory lapse can be experienced. And if there is no one prompting, then this causes embarrassment to not only the ritualist, but to all the brethren present. If there is to be a ceremony, and obviously a candidate who will be expecting something very special, the ceremony must be performed as smoothly and professionally as possible. We're not actors, and not all of us have super memories. Therefore, the presence of the... Now, we're going to move on to a few questions about the prompter, but before that, we seem to lose a bit. I don't know if you lost in there. I saw the screen go blank for a second, but perhaps we're all back together now. I'm going to give a prize at the end of this evening for the person who we think has given the biggest contribution to the workshop tonight and done the most to sort of help us discuss this subject. The prize will be a bottle of red wine. I won't get it tonight, obviously, but you will get it eventually. I will donate it, and as soon as there's a chance, we'll give it. And I'm going to ask Ian and Peter to help me decide at the end who have been the most helpful. So we're going to go into the role of the prompter now. And this requires considerations of the questions when and how. So question 2 is, when should the prompt be given? When should the prompt be given? Fingers on buzzers, time starts now. Right, Ian, who's first?
Well, you've got a lot more interest on this question. I think you've brought them to life. David Hall is first.
Yeah, I just realised how to do this now. I would say in most lodges, the prompter, especially in our lodge, is the actual immediate past master, being to the left of the worshipful master. But when to give a prompt is, I always think it's when the person requiring a prompt actually looks at the prompter, and it is understood that no prompt is given unless the person needed a prompt makes a proper action to look at the prompter. Otherwise, he might be just stopping for breath or a pause. So this is what I find.
Well, you've covered 3 things there, which are in my list of points. And I think the first of all is that it should only be given when requested by the ritualist. Usually by the ritualist turning field, he needs one. But this should be arranged before the lodge opens between the ritualist, whether it's the worshipful master or somebody doing some work like the charge in the first degree. They should make that clear between the two of themselves, and they should work. And as you quite rightly say, it's only when he gives the sign, it might be a nod, he might put a hand out to his friend to say, please help me. And the thing is not to interrupt the person doing the ritual. There's a word in music called rubato. rubato means you're not just playing like a machine. You're playing and you pause and you make the gaps a bit longer and shorter here, which makes it more meaningful. And you can hear this in music when people don't quite end the phrase, they pause on note and go. In the old days, when I used to work for the BBC, we were taught how to read the news. And we were taught to leave pauses. People rush things today and trip themselves up. If you actually wait with a bit of rubato and pause, you can very often remember your word. But people gabble. And when they gabble, they trip themselves up. And also it becomes meaningless. If you say a phrase of poetry very quickly, it's quite meaningless. But if you spread it, pause it, and put rubato in, it means. So that's another reason why you should never interrupt. But we can come interrupting. So, David, you covered 3 very good points there. Who is number 2 on this?
Andrew Lee is next. My junior grand.
Who?
Hello, Mike. Hi, Mike. Good evening.
Andrew Lee.
Yeah, the nemesis. So, Mike, I always agree a pre-agreed signal. So if I'm giving ritual, and I tend to speak very slowly because that gives me thinking time, then I agree a pre-agreed signal, which is usually a full-face look at the person who is the prompter. And that's the only thing. Because I try and speak slowly, sometimes prompters think they need to rush in, but actually it's only on a pre-agreed full-face look will I want any help with anything should the matter arise.
Well, I think that's absolutely right. It is between you and your prompter, and you must arrange the signal you want. The quieter the signal, I mean, obviously you don't want to wave your hands in the air, but if it's done, as you say, you look full face at him, some people put a hand, but I think most people would just take a look as if to say, yes, I'm ready, or give a little nod, and that does it. But if you interrupt somebody because they're going at a slight slower rate, as you say you do, then what's going to happen there is that you're going to jog them and they're going to get lost. The prompter should only offer a prompt, i.e., if the ritualist has gone wildly off course and is jumping a paragraph and missing the sense of the story so that the candidate really doesn't know where he is. Of course, but I won't say it because I'm sure the next person who answers is going to bring it up. So let's move on to the next one. To hear. Who's next?
Voice from the Carl Simmons.
Hi, everybody.
Carl.
Mike. Yes, I was going to give the same answer. It should be when requested by whoever's performing ceremony. And it is important to agree that prompt and that sign beforehand. It could just be the turn of a head. It could be the wave of a hand or whatever. As long as it's not a rude gesture. But that would be my answer as well.
Good. Thank you, Carl. Next.
The next is Leighton, is all I've got.
Right. Leighton?
Yes, Leighton Jones. Yes, what I would say is that agreeing a prompter is very important. What's even more important is that the other members of the lodge understand that there is only one prompter. There's nothing worse than more than one person chipping in. It throws people and completely spoils the ceremony.
Leighton, this was the very point I was waiting for. You must be telepathic or something, because this is what the next thing I was going to say was that there should only be one and one only prompter, and only the one selected by the ritualist. That's terribly important. So that's the when the prompting. But in the next question, we'll cover more here. Ian, did we cover everybody who answered that question?
Oh no, there were another 30 people. There were a lot of people in there.
Sorry, well, it's 7:17, so I'm going to move on to the third question, and that is, how should the prompt be given? So that will start, how should the prompt be given? And time starts now. Okay, who's first, Ian?
So we're starting with David,
David.
otherwise known as David's iPad. Bear with me.
Hello, David.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, there you
Yeah,
are.
a bit loud if you can. Speak up.
Right. Hang on. Hello.
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead.
I don't know what's happened here. I've got a blank screen, but the point I wanted to make is the prompter needs to prompt clearly and out loud. And in order to do that, he must be confident. And I was a founder of a lodge a couple of years ago where we have a prompter who is appointed as if he were an officer of the lodge. He has a music stand with an A5 ritual on it, and he sits midway between the worshipful master and the junior warden. So he's got a clear view of the whole lodge whenever anyone needs prompting, including the master, most importantly. And the important thing is he must prompt out loud.
He must what? What must he do?
He must prompt out loud. The whispered prompt is all well and good if you're sitting right next to someone who's got perfect hearing, but it's no good if you're really if you're wanting to make sure your prompt hits the point where it should do. In other words, the speaker.
Okay, that's very good. Thank you very much. And I'll a little bit more about that in a moment's time. What's it going to be? Somebody said in the first question in the group here that he felt the immediate past master. Well, my feeling is that it should be exactly that, somebody who's sitting about 3 feet from the ritualist, because you don't want somebody shouting across the room. You want somebody who can not whisper, but it must be said clearly enough so that you can hear it first time. Because I've heard people give the prompt and the WM doesn't hear it, or the ritualist doesn't hear it. So it's got to be clear enough for him to hear, but not shouted across the room. So we're left with the closest people to the WM are the IPM and the chaplain. Now, both of those chaps really don't have a great deal to do. The chaplain, bless his heart, is there for the opening and closing, and if it's special or in the mark degree or something, then there's quite a few bits of work for the chaplain to do in the ceremony. So I would have thought somebody as close to as the IPM would have been the ideal thing. Anyway, there's nothing worse though than the prompt coming from across the room, and more often than not, it's incorrect, and it's shouted out incorrectly. But of course, the prompter has got to move in the case of a first degree when the charge is given, so that the junior warden can have somebody sitting by him. But that could be the IPM moving there, or what it could be is one of the assistant ECs who's sitting right up near the junior warden's pedestal anyway, and he could just slip round and do it. Anyway, let's take the next answer. Thank you, David.
So it's Kevin Pegg now.
Kevin.
Good evening, everybody.
Hello, Kevin.
I listened to David, and I agreed that it needs to be clear. But I think sometimes when the prompter is following the ceremony or the ritual in the book, he might miss the nod. And I think that the person needing the prompt needs to be clear as well by using the word prompt or word and not be shy, so that the prompter is aware that he needs help. But if you're looking at the book to follow the words, you may miss a nod.
Well, that's interesting you said that, because at points 8 and 9 in my little script here, the prompter should know the passage of ritual that is to be performed and what should be taking place in this ceremony and where it is in the book. There's nothing worse than the deadly pause while the prompter fluffs through the ritual book trying to find the correct page. He should be slightly ahead of the ritualist, so that he is always ready to give the required word immediately. Now, I listened to your point about your eyes becomes for the prompt. Quite frankly, if you hold the book and you're looking, you can look at the book, following it with one finger and with your eye, and you can see out of the corner of your eye if the person's wanting a prompt. And anyway, there'll be a silence. And when you get the silence, all you do is look up and see if he's ready for a prompt or not. Just because there's a silence. Look up. Your fingers on where you are, and then you see the sun, and then you can give it. So I think that's the answer there. You see, at a theatre and at the opera, the prompter is invisible and inaudible to the audience. We don't have to go that far, but I go back again to, I don't think people should shout, but I think it should be clear enough, because many times I've seen people give it to a WM who probably is slightly hard of hearing, and then it has to be repeated, and that makes a bit of a fool of it. But my answer to that one of yours, and I really understand that, is that you are following it in the book, but if there is a pause, that is an immediate spark for you to look up and see just what's going on until he's asking for a prompt. Thank you, Kevin. Who's next, Ian?
Time for one more. It's Simon Abel.
Simon.
Good evening, Mike. Just as a precursor, what I do as the Lodge DC is to make an announcement just before the Lodge meeting starts, is to say that in this Lodge we have one prompter and one prompter only. Mm-hmm. And I name and point to exactly who that prompter is. But it also largely depends, going on to prompting, what you've agreed prior to the meeting starting with whoever's delivering that particular piece of ritual. It might be that the prompter might have to move around the room discreetly or at an appropriate time. And I always think a decent prompt should be given, if you're close enough to the person that's delivering the ritual, say just loud enough for him to hear, and you only want 2 or 3 words, and that will start them off on their train of thought again, and they're away. As it's been stated earlier, we don't want anybody shouting from one end of the room to the other. So being close, ideally, that's great, and just 2 or 3 words.
Well, Simon, I agree with you, but very often it's just one word is all you need. You can sometimes throw people if you give too many words. If it starts to be a sentence, they're listening to you and they're not thinking. When I'm doing ritual, I prefer just the one word. It's usually only the one word that's tripped me up, but that's just me. But thank you for that. That's a very good point. Well, is anybody going to come up with a question about the 3rd degree? Because that brings up another thing. Who's the next answer after Simon? Ian?
Peter Long is next.
Peter. Evening, Peter.
Bear with me. I'm just waiting for the unmute button to work.
That's all right, Ian. Don't worry. It must be murder for you.
Evening, brethren. Can you hear me?
Good evening, Peter. Yes.
I've no wish to repeat everything that's gone before, other than to summarise what I've heard, or I think I've heard, that
Yeah.
it should be clear and audible to the person requiring the prompt, depending on their level of hearing. Also, depending where the ritual is being performed in the lodge, you may need more than one designated prompter to save people running around the room like a scolded what's-it. And that's all.
Well, that's great. I think I think this is the point I made about in the first video, having the ADC do it from up there. But there is another possibility which will come at the end of the discussion when we do the poll vote at the end. And but I was going to mention about the third degree, because we all know that that is taken in darkness, and it's essential that the prompter should have a working torch, and that he's checked this before the ceremony starts. So often you hear the guy hasn't got a torch at all, or he hasn't checked it, or he's fumbling around in the book because he doesn't know where he is. We're not all great ritualists, but it's important as to, because the whole idea is to make the ceremony run right for the candidate, and that's what it's about. Have you got any more questions? Because the time's getting on. Who's next, Ian?
I do. I've got a special request.
Yeah.
From David Handley.
Right.
Let's see if we can get him in. There we go. David, you should be on.
Mike, yeah, thank you. Mike, I think the brethren have made some excellent points tonight, but the biggest thing for me as a Lodge DC, when we're having lodges of instruction and rehearsal, the prompter should be a role that we adopt in those places. That way, the way that we learn how each other works is by continually working together. So when we understand that somebody's deaf, we can adopt our prompting. When we know that somebody gives a hand signal or gives a nod or a look, we get to know each other. So to me, the most important thing is working together all of the time and practicing this in the lodge and at rehearsals and POIs. LOIs, sorry.
That's great. Thank you very much, David. That's excellent. Well, we're coming very near the end now, and this is coming to our poll vote. And the poll vote is a question. Just before that, I'll just say one little paragraph, if I may, in conclusion. The delivery by the ritualist should be at a measured pace, audible, and meaningful, and with the assistance. So our final vote then is to conclude the session tonight, and this is a yes/no vote on the polling system that Ian has very cleverly set up for us. A simple question with a yes or a no answer. Should the invisible officer always be a member of your own lodge only, or can he be from another lodge? And the time starts now. Well, welcome back, everybody. Now that's very interesting, isn't it? That is very, very interesting indeed. Oh, what's it going to? No, that's all right. Yes, we've got 73%, no, sorry, 59%, that's 73 people say yes, and 41%, 51 say no. So the majority of people feel that it should be a member of their own lodge, not a visitor. That's very interesting, because I've written down on a piece of paper here, I personally feel that it is better if a member of the lodge acts as prompter. Although I have seen visitors do it in some lodges, but my feeling is it's a lodge thing and it should be done by somebody from the lodge. So we've come to the end. It's now 7:32. Ian, would you like to say who you think might have won the bottle of wine tonight?
I would go for David Hall, being the first person to put his hand up.
Right, I'll agree with that. David, I want you very soon when we get together, which won't be too far. I've got the name down here so we won't forget. I think we've covered most things tonight, and I've thoroughly enjoyed being with you all. I would like to give a special vote of thanks to the other and of course Ian, Chief Grandmaster, for being with us tonight. Thank you all for attending. 140 was a few numbers have dropped off. They've rushed off to the barbecue, but I hope you all stay safe now. Yeah.
Can I have a word, please, Ian? Mike and Ian, if you don't mind. When you said about the third degree, well, I do the first and second degree opening, but when I have to do the third degree, I have cards written out in my hand, so I haven't got to fumble through the book. I find that much easier. Whether other people do that, I don't know. But I find it easier when I do opening and closing of the first and the same as the second. I've done the third degree opening once and I've used a card in my hand, and I find that much easier, even with the torch. Saves you fumbling around.
That's a brilliant idea, but my only comment is, particularly in the dark, and also being an ordinary human being, what if you drop the blinking things on the floor? You have to reassemble in the correct order. If you drop a book, you've got a bigger chance of picking up.
Correct. That's why I use a card. I have a card printed out when I do it.
One card, not cards. Yeah, not small.
No, I have
cards.
a card
It's
for
all
the
on one
first
card.
degree and closing. I have a card made out for the second opening and closing. And when I have the third degree, when the lights are out with the torch, I have a card printed for myself, galvanised, so I know exactly what I'm doing.
If you can get the whole of that on the whole of the third degree,
I can, yes. I can do the third degree on a card.
on the front and back to one card.
It's just an idea. Of course, I really know.
Very good.
Thank you.
Everybody, I'd like to say thank you very much to Mike for presenting this evening. Sorry, apologies for the difficulties with some of the internet, but I hope you have a wonderful week. We'll catch up with you next week, hopefully.
Thank you for the nice evening. Great. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Mike. Well, and take care.
Bye.
Good night, all.